Welcome. Today, we're diving into the concept of a sublease, a term you might have heard if you've ever rented an apartment or office space. Subleasing is a common practice in the world of real estate, but many people are unsure about what it actually means and how it works. In this video, we'll break down the essentials of subleasing, explore when and why it might be used, and discuss the key points you need to know before entering into a sublease agreement. Let's start by understanding the basic definition and context of a sublease. A sublease is an arrangement where the original tenant of a rental property rents out all or part of that property to another person, known as the subtenant. This means the original tenant, who holds the lease with the landlord, becomes a sort of middle person. The subtenant pays rent to the original tenant, who in turn continues to pay the landlord. This setup can be useful if the original tenant needs to move temporarily but doesn't want to break their lease. It's important to note that the original tenant remains responsible to the landlord for the lease terms. In a sublease agreement, there are three main parties: the landlord, the original tenant, and the subtenant. The landlord owns the property and has a lease agreement with the original tenant. The original tenant, who may need to leave the property temporarily, finds a subtenant to occupy the space. The subtenant pays rent to the original tenant, not directly to the landlord. However, the landlord's approval is often required before a sublease can take place, and the original tenant remains legally responsible for the lease. The process of subleasing typically starts when the original tenant realizes they need to leave the rental property before their lease ends. Instead of breaking the lease, which can have financial penalties, the tenant seeks a subtenant. Once a suitable subtenant is found, a sublease agreement is drafted, outlining the terms, rent, amount, and duration. The subtenant moves in and pays rent to the original tenant, who continues to pay the landlord. This arrangement allows the original tenant to fulfill their lease obligations while being away. It's important to distinguish between a sublease and an assignment. In a sublease, the original tenant remains responsible for the lease and acts as a landlord to the subtenant. In an assignment, the original tenant transfers all their rights and responsibilities under the lease to a new tenant, who then deals directly with the landlord. With a sublease, the original lease remains in effect, and the original tenant is still on the hook if the subtenant fails to pay rent or damages the property. Subleasing is often used when the original tenant needs to move temporarily for work, school, or personal reasons, but plans to return before the lease ends. It can also be helpful if the tenant wants to avoid breaking the lease and paying penalties. Subleasing is common in college towns, among professionals on temporary assignments, or in cities with high rent where tenants want to share costs. It's a flexible solution for both tenants and subtenants. Most leases require the landlord's approval before a sublease can take place. This is to ensure that the new occupant meets the landlord's standards and that the property is protected. The original tenant should always check their lease agreement for any clauses about subleasing and seek written permission from the landlord. Failing to get approval can lead to eviction or other legal issues, so it's a crucial step in the process. A sublease agreement is a legal document that outlines the terms between the original tenant and the subtenant. It should include details like the rental period, rent amount, security deposit, and responsibilities for utilities and maintenance. Both parties should sign the agreement, and it's wise to have the landlord review it as well. A clear, written agreement helps prevent misunderstandings and protects everyone's interests. Even after subleasing, the original tenant remains responsible for the lease. This means they must ensure the rent is paid on time and the property is maintained according to the lease terms. If the subtenant fails to pay rent or causes damage, the landlord will hold the original tenant accountable. That's why it's important for the original tenant to choose a reliable subtenant and maintain good communication throughout the sublease period. The subtenant has the right to occupy the property and use it as outlined in the sublease agreement. They must pay rent to the original tenant and follow the rules set in both the sublease and the original lease. The subtenant should also take care of the property and report any issues promptly. If the subtenant violates the agreement, they can be evicted by the original tenant, who is still responsible to the landlord. Subleasing is common in situations where tenants need to relocate temporarily, such as for a job transfer, study abroad program, or extended travel. It can also be used when roommates move out and the remaining tenant wants to fill the space. In high-demand rental markets, subleasing can help tenants avoid losing their apartment or paying double rent. Each scenario has its own considerations, but the basic principles remain the same. Subleasing offers several benefits. For the original tenant, it provides a way to avoid breaking the lease and paying penalties. It can also help save money by sharing rent costs. For the subtenant, subleasing can be a more flexible and affordable option, often with shorter lease terms. Landlords may benefit by having the property occupied and rent paid, even if the original tenant is away. While subleasing can be convenient, It also comes with risks. The original tenant is still responsible for the lease, so if the subtenant fails to pay rent or damages the property, the tenant must cover the costs. There can also be legal issues if the landlord's approval isn't obtained. It's important to screen subtenants carefully and have a solid agreement in place to minimize these risks. Subleasing is subject to local laws and regulations, which can vary widely. Some cities or states have strict rules about subleasing, while others are more flexible. It's essential to research the laws in your area and ensure all agreements comply with them. Consulting with a legal professional or real estate expert can help you avoid potential pitfalls and ensure a smooth subleasing process. Finding a trustworthy subtenant is crucial for a successful sublease. Start by asking friends, colleagues, or classmates if they know anyone looking for a place. You can also use online platforms or community boards to advertise the sublease. Be sure to screen potential subtenants carefully, checking references and credit history to ensure they are reliable and responsible. Screening subtenants is one of the most important steps in the subleasing process. Ask for references from previous landlords, verify employment, and check credit history if possible. This helps ensure the subtenant will pay rent on time and take care of the property. A thorough screening process can save you from headaches down the road and protect your relationship with the landlord. When subleasing, the original tenant and subtenant must agree on the rent amount and other terms. The rent can be the same as the original lease or adjusted based on market conditions. Other terms, such as utilities, maintenance, and duration, should be clearly outlined in the sublease agreement. Clear communication and documentation help prevent disputes and ensure a smooth arrangement. Security deposits can be a tricky part of subleasing. The original tenant may have paid a deposit to the landlord, but the subtenant might also be asked to provide a deposit to the original tenant. It's important to clarify who holds the deposit and under what conditions it will be returned. Documenting the property's condition before and after the sublease can help avoid disputes over damages. Decide in advance who will be responsible for paying utilities and maintaining the property during the sublease period. This should be clearly stated in the sublease agreement. Sometimes, the original tenant continues to pay utilities and is reimbursed by the subtenant, while in other cases, the subtenant pays directly. Clear arrangements help avoid confusion and ensure the property is well cared for. The duration of a sublease can vary depending on the needs of the original tenant and the subtenant. It might last for a few months or until the end of the original lease. Be sure to specify the start and end dates in the sublease agreement. If the subtenant wants to stay longer, a new agreement may be needed, and the landlord's approval may be required again. A sublease can end for several reasons. The term expires, the original tenant returns, or the subtenant violates the agreement. The sublease agreement should outline the process for ending the arrangement, including notice periods and any penalties. Both parties should communicate clearly and follow the agreed-upon procedures to ensure a smooth transition. If the original tenant plans to return to the property after the sublease ends, it's important to coordinate with the subtenant and the landlord. The property should be inspected for any damages, and the subtenant should move out by the agreed-upon date. A smooth handover helps maintain good relationships and ensures the property is ready for the original tenant's return. Disputes can arise during a sublease, such as disagreements over rent, property condition, or responsibilities. The sublease agreement should include procedures for resolving conflicts, such as mediation or arbitration. Open communication and documentation of all agreements and property conditions can help prevent and resolve disputes quickly and fairly. Subleasing is common in apartment rentals, especially in cities with high tenant turnover. Apartment leases often have specific clauses about subleasing, so it's important to review the lease and follow the building's policies. Some apartment complexes may have their own sublease application process or require background checks for subtenants. Subleasing isn't limited to residential properties. It's also common in commercial real estate. Businesses may sublease office or retail space if they downsize or relocate. Commercial subleases often involve more complex agreements and may require the landlord's approval and legal review. It's important to understand the terms and consult professionals when subleasing commercial spaces. Roommate subleasing occurs when one roommate moves out and another person takes their place. The remaining tenants may sublease the room to a new person, but it's important to get the landlord's approval and update the lease if necessary. Clear communication among all roommates and the landlord helps ensure a smooth transition and avoids conflicts. Short-term subleases are popular among students, interns, or travelers who need housing for a limited period. These arrangements can be more flexible and may not require a long-term commitment. However, it's still important to have a written agreement and follow all legal requirements to protect both parties. Long-term subleases can last for several months or even years, depending on the original lease. These arrangements are more common in commercial real estate, but can also occur in residential settings. Long-term subleases require careful planning, clear agreements, and ongoing communication to ensure all parties are satisfied throughout the term. If the property is furnished, the sublease agreement should specify which items are included and their condition. Both parties should document the state of the furniture and appliances before the subtenant moves in. Taking photos and making a checklist can help avoid disputes when the sublease ends and the property is returned. Insurance is an important aspect of subleasing. The original tenant should check if their renter's insurance covers subtenants or if the subtenant needs their own policy. Landlords may also require proof of insurance from both parties. Having the right coverage protects everyone in case of accidents or damages during the sublease period. Good communication is key to a successful sublease. The original tenant, subtenant, and landlord should all stay informed about important dates, payments, and responsibilities. Regular check-ins and written updates can help prevent misunderstandings and keep everyone on the same page throughout the sublease period. There are many online platforms that make subleasing easier. These websites allow tenants to list available subleases, connect with potential subtenants, and even create agreements online. Using reputable platforms can help you reach a wider audience and streamline the subleasing process, but always verify the legitimacy of interested parties. Subleasing can affect your credit if things go wrong. If the subtenant fails to pay rent and the original tenant can't cover it, the landlord may report missed payments to credit bureaus. This can damage the original tenant's credit score. That's why it's important to choose a reliable subtenant and stay on top of all payments and obligations. International subleasing can be more complex due to different laws, language barriers, and cultural differences. If you're subleasing to or from someone in another country, it's important to understand the local regulations and seek legal advice. Clear agreements and communication are even more critical in international arrangements. Subleasing can have tax implications, especially if you make a profit from the arrangement. The original tenant may need to report rental income on their taxes, and certain expenses may be deductible. It's wise to keep detailed records and consult a tax professional to ensure compliance with tax laws. In some cities, rent-controlled apartments have strict rules about subleasing. The landlord may limit the rent you can charge or require specific approval processes. Violating these rules can result in fines or eviction. Always check local rent control laws before subleasing a rent-controlled property. Subleasing without the landlord's approval or violating lease terms can lead to eviction. The original tenant and subtenant may both be required to leave the property. To avoid this risk, always follow the proper procedures, get written approval, and comply with all lease and legal requirements. If pets are involved, the sublease agreement should specify whether they are allowed and any related rules or deposits. The original lease may have restrictions on pets, so it's important to review those terms and communicate clearly with the landlord and subtenant. Proper planning helps avoid conflicts and ensures everyone's expectations are met. If the subtenant has accessibility needs or wants to make modifications to the property, these should be discussed and agreed upon in advance. The landlord may need to approve any changes, and the sublease agreement should outline who is responsible for costs and restoring the property at the end of the sublease. Transferring utility accounts can be part of the subleasing process. Decide whether the subtenant will set up their own accounts or reimburse the original tenant. Make sure all arrangements are documented in the sublease agreement to prevent confusion and ensure bills are paid on time. With technology, it's easier than ever to create and sign sublease agreements digitally. Many platforms offer secure digital signatures, making the process faster and more convenient. Just make sure digital agreements are legally recognized in your area and that all parties receive copies for their records. The COVID-19 pandemic has affected subleasing, with more people working remotely or relocating. Some tenants have used subleasing to manage changing circumstances. However, health and safety guidelines, as well as local regulations, should be followed. Communication and flexibility are especially important during uncertain times. Let's look at a real-life example. Sarah needed to move for a new job but had 6 months left on her apartment lease. She found a subtenant, Mark, after getting her landlord's approval. They signed a clear sublease agreement, and Mark paid rent on time. When Sarah returned, the apartment was in good condition, and both parties were satisfied. This case highlights the importance of communication, documentation, and following proper procedures. Now, consider another scenario. John subleased his apartment without telling his landlord. The subtenant stopped paying rent and caused damage. The landlord discovered the unauthorized sublease and evicted both John and the subtenant. John lost his security deposit and faced legal trouble. This example shows why it's critical to get approval and have a solid agreement in place. To wrap up, Subleasing can be a practical solution for tenants who need flexibility, but it comes with responsibilities and risks. Always review your lease, get landlord approval, and create a clear, written agreement. Screen subtenants carefully and communicate openly throughout the process. By following these steps, you can make subleasing a smooth and beneficial experience for everyone involved.